Hello, good afternoon. How are you guys doing today? It's your girl Janine with Symphony Reads. I'm in the house. Let's see what happened today. I'm in the house. I did go out today. I was excited because I got to do my walk today. And I really did wanted to post from outside while I was walking because it was cold and a little windy, but it was a very good walk. And but every time I was in the middle of um, recording, someone called the phone and that cut the recording off. So I said, okay, I'll just try to do it when I'm home. Is which that's why I'm here. So I know I normally do daily motive. I know my hair is just doing some very weird things right now. I don't know. Anyway, um, doing some daily inspiration, positive thinking, motivation, courage. And I will do that. That will be something I do later on today. Um, but right now, I wanted to kind of come on and talk about something that, again, this may be a trigger warning. And I apologize. I'm not trying to trigger anyone, but um, it was a post in a group that I am that kind of shook me up a little bit. And I get the frustration. So, but just had to calm that individual down and let them understand that, you know, there's another side that we do have to take into consideration and why we have to take it into consideration. And what the topic that I'm going to talk about today is self-harm. Um, and I know I've probably given my my experience with like depression and bipolar and do I take medication, do I not take a medication? I think I've touched on those before. I know I've definitely touched on suicidal in my own journey, and with the suicide, having those thoughts, those ideations. But I don't think I've ever really talked about the self-harm, which is just another aspect of something that, I have to deal with. I will say the last time I self-harmed, if I'm being honest, it was back in December. So I'm not even a month yet free of self-harm. So, I'm working on it. I was good for a long time, and just it was a bad time. So, unfortunately, I took back up to self-harm. And yeah, I don't know how else to explain that one, but um I did. So like I said, it's not even, yeah, it's not quite a month yet. Probably by the end of this month it'll be a full month that I can say that I've been clean of of self-harm, that I have not done it. And what I want to talk about, because not giving no names or the situation, but this person was extremely upset because, it's a group that we're all in. We're all people who have self-harmed, or their parents in there who have children who self-harm. And, it's just finding that support for one another, and finding the support for the parents, to understand and to why this is happening. And so he was really upset because he got someone had reported his post. That's what it was. And so Facebook had to send out, a post to let him know that, you know, um, and give him information about, the suicide hotline. And I can't remember what else was on that post. But he was absolutely livid. And he said, but this is what this community is for. And if I can't, you know, um, voice myself here, then and I'll just have to keep it to myself, which I think, in its light, it's that's not good either. You know what I'm saying? And then there were other people who read the post that was like, I'm leaving this space because it's not safe. I'm just gonna get reported. I can't, express myself, explain myself, that type issue. And after reaching out, I'm like, this is a little explosive. After kind of reaching out and, just giving the perspective, like what you have to understand. I get where you're coming from because I really get where he's coming from. I've been there myself. And, but, what I told him is what you have to understand is although the intent of suicide is not there, the problem is when you start self-harming, it could go too far. And without you trying to make it go too far, and you can end up killing yourself, period. And when you write a post in such a way where it's letting people know that that is what you're doing, that's like, at the same token, that is like you physically seeing a child being abused and you don't call 911. So it's like you see this in front of you, but you don't call 911. Or you suspect it, but you don't call 911. What happens to that child? You know what I'm saying? And the thought is, oh my gosh, this person is self-harming themselves right now. This person could go too far. What do I do? You have to report it. It's going to be reported, period. It's not to say that that's what your intent was. And it's not about in your mind, in our minds. We're not trying to necessarily commit suicide. But you have to look at it from another person's perspective. If they can go as far as harming themselves, they can end up accidentally killing themselves. And then, I think he understood. I said, so it's not that anyone's trying to censor what you're saying. I really don't believe that that was the intent. But when you put a post out like that, and it, that triggers a person who is like, oh, and it's a concern that triggers them. They're like, oh my God, I don't know, he could have gone too far, whatever have you, and it's going to be reported. So, and it's just going to be reported. And I think he saw it a little differently. I said it was more, I'm pretty sure it's more of a concern, not necessarily, and a lot of people still don't understand the self-harm thing. A lot, that's not everyone's zhuzh or everyone's stronghold. And I talk freely about that is my stronghold. That is a problem I've had since I was a young girl when I started that type of behavior. And so I just wanted to come on and kind of just talk about that because, one, when we start talking self-harm, a lot of people go straight to, oh my goodness, they're cutting. And that's not necessarily true. There are other ways of self-harming that has nothing at all to do with solely cutting. You could be harming yourself like I don't want to give any ideas, but there's other ways. Picking the skin is another way of a self-harm, especially when and I'm talking gold mine digging, picking at the skin is another tool that, some people do to self-harm. And, to someone that don't get that, just think that, oh goodness, they're picking, and but not see, the self-harm in that. And I've known people who done different things. I knew a person who would intentionally stub their toe. That was, and I'm not like, again, and I'm not going to go into all of the type things that people do. Some people swallow things that should not be swallowed um, as a method of self-harm. Then the point is, there are other ways. It's not just cutting. I mean, that is the more of the more common ways that I've, been in contact with other people and myself. And but that's just not the only thing. And so, okay, so now you have a person who does this to themselves. And the question is why? Everybody wants the why is this person doing this to themselves? And honestly, there are different reasons. I can't say it's one specific reason why someone would choose to do that to themselves. Or, I can't make that, I can tell you for me, I had different reasons for different times, and it always was happening around a very, very, very stressful time. Like, I mean, it was just stress that I couldn't deal with. And sometimes, I mean, I would be so stressed out. The situation was just so stressed out that I would be numb, like straight up numb. Like, it's like I couldn't feel anything. Like, you I just was numb all over, inside and out. And so sometimes the cutting for me, in that, I needed to see that I was still human. If that makes, and then it might not make sense to a lot of people, but I didn't feel like when I was numb, like people would say things to me and I just didn't feel, I didn't have any emotions. I wasn't laughing, I wasn't smiling, I wasn't crying, I wasn't yelling. I mean, seriously, I was just straight up numb. And I would walk around like that. Like, I needed to know I was still human. I needed to see that blood, because that let me knew that I was still at least human and I'm not, tripping. And then other times it was, I was so hard on myself for whatever was going on. Like, if I did something wrong, I mean, I was like 300 times harder on myself about it, and I wouldn't let it go. And I felt like that needed to be punished, if you will. And I use self-harm as a way to punish myself for just the wrong that I was doing. And then sometimes, again, I used it as an alternative to, I'm in pain. I am in a emotional pain. So to get rid of that emotional pain, I would substitute it for a physical pain, and a pain that I could control, that I created. I don't know if that makes sense to a person who may not even get it, but it's like, and it was temporary. It was all temporary, but I just needed, someone did something to me and it was out of my control, and it brought a lot of pain to me. You know what I'm saying? And pain that was carried with me for years. But when I cut, that was a pain for me that I could control. And and it took away of the focus on another pain. So really all it is, when we start talking self-harm, is negative coping skills that we have and that we need to replace with more positive coping skills. Because and I'm gonna tell you this, when you start on that path of self-harming, I don't know if I've ever said this before, but it can be very addictive. I mean, just like drugs, alcohol can be very addictive to people. Self-harming can be very addictive behavior, and it's something that you crave. It's something that you can be like, oh, I just it's almost like your fix at that point. And it's so when they're treating, when you have a therapist, when this is coming all out in the wash and you have a therapist, and I can't speak for everybody, but I will speak in my own case, they had to treat me as 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 I was an addict. And so I had to be treated that way, as an addict, an addict of self-harming, not necessarily drugs or alcohol. So you have meetings that probably with other people that self-harm as well, that you go through, and it's almost like a 12-step program. Just and you have things that you have to go through. And the last time that I self-harm, I called my therapist. I knew I was in big trouble. I had to call someone. And even she, getting to my next point, called 911. And the police was right there at my door. What people don't always understand with self-harm is we don't necessarily want to commit suicide, or to die by suicide. That is not our first and foremost thing. Okay? But again, also in understanding that that's not where our mindset is at. And that's not where our mindset is necessarily at. But you have to look on the flip side of that. As I probably said, when you self-harm, it's not necessarily the intent of the person who's self-harming to want to kill themselves at that. That's not where they're going. But you can't go too far. And it could be truly an accident that you went too far. You cut too deep. You hit too hard, or whatever it is for you. And it can inevitably kill yourself. So when you are in a situation, like I was in a situation, and I admit it, I told my therapist, and I knew I was screwed up. And I physically told her, I said, look, and I said, I'm self-harming. And she said, when was the last time? And I think I was a week of doing this. I would wake up, go to sleep, wake up, go to sleep. A whole week of doing this. And, I told her, and I think within 10, 15, I don't even know how long, it wasn't that long. I got that knock on the door. As soon as that, I already knew who it was and why. And, because her responsibility, and that's what we have to understand too, is, oh my goodness, she's hurting herself. And I'm afraid she might have unknowingly gone too far. So it's going to be reported, is just all I'm saying. And whether you betrayed my trust, I get that, but you have to deal with it as, no different than if a person is saying, I have a gun to my head. Are you really not going to believe or think that person might accidentally, it's one of those things. Oh my goodness. Maybe that wasn't their intent, but stuff happens. Accidents do happen. And so it's going to be reported. Okay. This person's post, I'm like, and I didn't really read the post. I don't know the post, and it might have been deleted, because if they reported it like that, I'm pretty sure that the post was deleted. And but I like I was sharing with him, I said, but you have to see the flip side of that. A person is panicking on one side because they know, and they know you need help. They need to get you help, and they want you alive. Nobody wants you not here. So, it's just understanding those points. And, I wasn't upset. Now, if this was some years ago and this was happening, I probably would have been furious that this was happening. But I get his point. I do. Because he's like, if I can't express myself here, then I'm just not safe to express myself, period. And I'm like, it's not a point that you can't express yourself. But even if you, and I told him, I said, if we were talking and whatever you put in that post and you said that to me, I probably would have, and this is as a person who self-harms themselves, would have been like, oh no. What do? I probably would have called the suicide hotline myself and said, this is the situation. What do I do? They would have said, call 911, call the crisis intervention team, report it to, in this case, Facebook, because I don't know where the person lives. You're going to have to report that, so just know that the intent is to keep you from harming yourself or anybody else, keep you from accidentally killing yourself. So we have to understand it from both. We do, and that's why I go to therapy, to try to release, and and being in a group of others who, have the same issue as I do, you know what I'm saying? Or, the same struggle. It's very helpful. And, it's a day by day. It's a day by day, And so to celebrate a person saying, I'm 2 days clean of self-harm, we're all clapping and we're all like, yay, high-fiving, because it can be a literal spree, if you will, of the self-harm. It's not just a one-day event sometimes. Sometimes it could be weeks, it can be a couple of days, it could be a month. You just don't know. And when you think of the self-harm too, depending on where it is, again, it could be in a place where you can accidentally go too far and boom, what you gonna do? So I mean, and I just want others, like I told him, I said, and it's one of those very touchy, it's a touchy fine line, but don't see it as someone telling on you. That's someone caring about you. And that's coming from someone too who has the same issue. I had to see it as, she's my therapist and it's her job. And to hear something like that come out from me, it's her job to report it. She wouldn't have been doing her job if she didn't. And then if something would have happened to me, and like that would have been her, because she would have known. What did you know? And you didn't do nothing. You know what I'm saying? And that's a burden nobody wants. Nobody. So, I mean, there's different reasons. And I think that's the one thing I just want. There are different reasons. There are different ways to the self-harm. It's not just a one way thing. And it can be addictive. Let's just get that to where it is. And I think if you have a child, and I've been asked this question many a time, well, what happened if you have a child who is self-harming? What do I do? A conversation has to be made. If you don't feel comfortable talking to your child one-on-one, and again, a lot of things is how you say it. You know what I mean? So you don't just, I can't believe you doing this, and making the person feel like even worse. Because let me tell you, when you doing that, you don't feel good about yourself. You don't. You feel really crappy about yourself. And I could say some other words, but we're not going there. I'm just saying, you don't feel good about yourself. And, so to have someone making you feel worse is not going to make the situation any better. And if you don't know how to approach it and put it in a way where you're not, making a person feel worse for what they're doing, then you need help. You need to talk with them with a therapist or get them in a therapy session. And, have that conversation with someone there with you. You know what I'm saying? As a parent, if you can't handle that. And I mean, it's a care thing. I try to be as very open, and I think I notice things because, again, it's something that I suffer with. And it's easy to cover up a lot of things, and even my husband to this day, he looks me over. Sometimes he do it while I'm asleep. And then he be like, I have to pay more attention to you, because he's like, I need to know when, I didn't know that it had gotten that bad for you. And, so again, a conversation needs to be made. It doesn't necessarily have to be done by yourself, is what I'm saying. Especially because it is such a sensitive situation, in a subject, and and a person who's self-harming doesn't have the best opinion of themselves or whatever the situation is that surrounds them. And so if you is not always what you say, but how you say it. So if you feel like you cannot have that conversation, that open communication conversation with your child on your own, then I would suggest you set up a therapy session, um, and have that conversation with the therapist there, who can put it in a way that that is understood. And as I say, and I will continue to say it, if you are talking to someone and they are they are telling you that they've self-harmed or is about to self-harm, it's okay to call 911. And I mean, they may be upset. I'm not going to say they're not going to be upset. They may feel betrayed, because the intent is they could go too far. And that's, nobody wants that end result. Nobody. But it's possible. So that's why I'm saying that it has to be called. A person who is self-harming needs to talk to someone. They may not feel comfortable talking to the parent. They may feel comfortable talking to a therapist. I always say call the suicide hotline. They even have hotlines for self-harm, text hotlines that I remember. But you can call and they will definitely, talk with you and kind of just, walk you through, because at the end of the day, you need someone to talk to. You can't keep all of that stuff inside of yourself. That's part of the problem. Even for me, I can't keep that stuff. It's toxic. It's not good. It's not healthy. And then, we have to replace the negative coping with positive coping. And that could be maybe call a friend. Because I tell you, it's nothing like a person who loves you has to go through your house and take every sharp object, know the person, out. And that's just real talk. Because they're afraid of what you do. And you know, I I had to give up all of my tools, if you will. And I gave them up, I think that was 2017 maybe, or 18. I think it was beginning around 2018 when I had this problem. And, I reached out to my pastor and we talked. And, we would have sessions. It seemed like every day. And I don't think it was every day, but I know we talked a lot when I was going through that. And it got to the point where I felt strong enough to just, here's all my apparatuses. Here you go. I can't, because the temptation is too great. If I see it, I'm going to want to do something with it. And I gave them up then. But on that too, as you see, come sometime, at the end of 2019, I had the same problem. And so, but it's being treated a little different because she, my therapist is a she, and she was like, this is more of an addiction, so I have to treat it as such, because you keep going back to it. And so I just, I'm sorry that I took so long, but I hope, this gives a better understanding. I don't know if it does. I don't know. Like I said, I can only draw off of my own experience with it. And it's not a safe thing. I will definitely say that it's not a safe thing to do for anybody. It's not healthy for anybody. Um, but it's not so uncommon. I think it's still not talked about probably the way it needs to be talked about, but it's not an uncommon thing. And you know what I'm saying? Like I say, my biggest thing is as a parent, and I'm a parent, and I look at my kids all the time, and that doesn't mean that they haven't. And I try to be very open, and in those areas, especially with my older daughter, she knows how open I try to be with it, and so I feel like she would talk to me. But like I told her, if you feel like you can't talk to me about it, you need to talk to someone, because you're gonna need it. It just needs to be addressed, period, point blank, in a discussion. And if that's not with me as a parent, I'm just gonna have to be okay with that, because the object is not getting in your feelings about it. It's like, well, I need you to talk to somebody. So if it's not me, that's cool, but we need to get you some help to help you navigate this, and know that there's a better way of handling your emotions and your feelings and what's happening inside of you in situations that go on. There's a healthier way. So again, like I said, comment, let me know if this was helpful. Um, it is not, like I said, an easy subject to talk about. But I think it needs to be addressed as good as possible. And just don't always see it as, they're ratting me out. See it more as they care enough because they don't want me to go too far. And we together can get on the recovery journey, and that recovery is not going to be a day, a month. It just depends on the person. So be blessed, and I will see you later on for our February 14th positive thinking. Be blessed.